How do I set up a static IP address on Ubuntu server? I think we should find out. A server on the network needs to be contactable by other servers on the network, like database servers or app servers, or maybe users need to get to their files and folders on that server. In order for that server to be found on the network, it needs to have the same fixed IP address or a static IP address so that it can be found easily by other servers and other users on the network to be able to access its services. To do that, we need to configure the network interface card on the server, and the way it's done is through a file that describes exactly how the network interface card should be set up. For this example, I have a NIC already configured to DHCP, but what we're going to do is configure another NIC which will have a static IP address. So let's get started. I have my server set up here, which is named server 01, and first of all what we want to do is check what IP addresses we have on this system. We have this network interface and it has this address and it's dynamic, which means it's getting picked up from DHCP. This one is the one we want to configure and it doesn't have an IP address. The network interfaces are configured in a file which is in etc/netplan. And if we look in here, we have this configuration file and we can go ahead and look at the contents of that file. It's set to be configured using DHCP because it's set to true, and this is all the configuration that's required. Ubuntu uses a utility called netplan to configure the network devices, and netplan looks at that configuration file and applies the configuration at boot, or if the configuration is applied manually, as we'll be doing when we configure the static IP address. In order to use netplan, we can use the get command, and this will print out the configuration of the file as well. In order to set netplan settings, what we can do is use netplan set. Netplan uses YAML files, which is why you see these indents showing up in the files here, and then it's indented there, and these are quite important. So you can manually go into this file and you can change the settings for your configuration, but there is also another way to do it, which is to use the netplan set method. And what we can do is go into where we want to start off in the netplan setting. So we'll do ethernets dot, and then we can access the other properties, and we want to configure eth1, and what we want to configure there is the IP address. And the way netplan works is that you have your key here and then you set your value using an equals, and in this case, because you can have more than one IP address, you use the square brackets. I'm going to set the static IP address on this system as 10.0.10.10, and I'm going to use the 24 subnet mask. I can also specify that it should create a new file to save this setting to using this option here, origin hint. I'm going to call the file eth1-netconfig. To run this command, you need to make sure that you have root privileges. So I'll set sudo at the start. Now if I run netplan get, you can see that it combines the two files together to show me the different interfaces that are configured. So eth0 is set to DHCP and eth1 is set with that static IP address. I also want to set some other settings which are common for setting IP addresses. which is the gateway, and it's going to be IPv4, so I say gateway 4, and I will set that to 10.0.10.1, and it will again save to this new file for this network interface. I'm also going to set the name servers. And again, you can set multiple name servers, so you use square brackets. I'm going to set these to 10.0.10.1 again. Now if I look at netplan get again, you'll see I have all my settings neatly configured for me and indented correctly as well, so I haven't made any mistakes. Sudo netplan apply. Now if we look at the IP addresses, we'll see that ETH1 is configured with that static IP address, and it will also have the gateway and name servers configured as well. So although you can go in and you can edit these two files here, you may find that it's easier to use netplan and use the set and get methods to do this. And if we look in that new file that I created, you'll see it's all configured as expected. It's also a good idea to separate out your network interfaces into separate files. It's easier for you to work with them, particularly when you have several NICs on a server. So that's how you set a static IP address on an Ubuntu server. I hope you found this useful, and that's it for this episode. If you're new here at STech Systems, the IT Skills Library is a collection of questions and answers to build your IT skills one answer at a time. Subscribe now and start building your skills today.